And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them. 1 Enoch 6:1, 2. Before the flood. Before the commandments. Before religion became a structure and divinity became a throne above, there was a fracture in the heavens. A transgression, not of war, but of intimacy. And at the center of that break stood a group not often named in Scripture, yet whose impact echoes across every corner of forgotten history, the Watchers. They were not fallen in the beginning. They were assigned, designated by the Most High as observers of the human realm. Not to intervene, not to shape, only to watch. In the Book of Enoch, a mystical Jewish text preserved in the ancient Ethiopian Guizi language and considered scripture by the Ethiopian Church and rediscovered in fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls, these beings are called Grigori or Watchers. Angels assigned to observe human life without interfering. 200 in number, descending in unity upon Mount Hermon. Their leader was Semjaza, though it was Azazel whose teachings would echo darkest through time. These were angels who broke their order. They saw the beauty of human daughters and chose incarnation, not only to desire, but to possess. And so began the first forbidden act, union between the divine and the mortal. From this act came the Nephilim, hybrids, giants, anomalies of soul and form. The text does not romanticize them. It calls them violent, all-consuming, destructive. The earth cried out beneath their weight. But more dangerous than bloodline was transmission. The Watchers brought knowledge, not merely facts, but frequencies. Encoded systems once confined to the celestial realms. They taught humans how to forge metal into weapons. They unveiled the secrets of roots and enchantments. They taught signs of the stars, not for reverence but manipulation. Astrology, glamour, warfare, the alphabet of dominion. Azazel gave humanity mirrors, adornment, and the art of beautification, not for sacred ritual, but for control through desire. Barakiel revealed the motions of the stars. Kokabel taught signs. Penemu, secrets of writing. Gadriel, the art of deception. This was not the light of wisdom. It was the weight of knowledge without grounding. Acceleration without alignment. Power without principle. The Book of Enoch names each of them. It names the crimes. And it names the consequences. Unlike Genesis, which barely alludes to these events in a few cryptic verses, Enoch's record is precise, almost legalistic. It functions as a witness statement, a ledger of transgression. And in the caves of Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were uncovered between 1947 and 1956, multiple Aramaic fragments of Enoch's Book of the Watchers confirmed its antiquity. 4Q 201 through 4Q 212 catalogued, translated, aligned with the Guizi tradition. What had been whispered returned in stone and parchment. The Watcher's knowledge was never meant to be shared. Not because knowledge is evil, but because it requires structure. The heavens, as described to Enoch in his later visions, are not chaos. They are order layered in light. Dimensions held by balance. The teachings of the Watchers fractured that balance. For a time, the earth was overtaken. Giants walked the land, feeding on all life. Violence escalated beyond measure. And the heavens, once silent, responded. But before judgment came, there was one called to ascend. One man, Enoch, seventh from Adam, who was not simply a prophet but an anomaly. A bridge. The Watchers, now imprisoned and terrified, begged Enoch to intercede. He was taken by holy ones into higher realms. There he saw their sentence inscribed in fire. There he was shown the hidden architecture of the cosmos. That, however, is not yet this chapter. What matters now is that the Watchers fell not for hatred but for hunger. And hunger, when directed toward truth without reverence, becomes contagion. Their story did not vanish. It mutated. In Sumer, they were the Anunnaki. In Egypt, echoes of them remain in Thoth and Ptah, transmitters of cosmic knowledge. In Mesoamerica, they returned as feathered serpents, bearing calendars and mathematics. Always teaching, always breaking the pattern. The same pattern. A descent. A gift. A fall. The Book of Enoch stands not as myth, but as early memory, a preserved fragment of a much older conversation. One between human potential and divine boundary. And though the Watchers were bound, their knowledge was not. It spread. through ritual, through bloodlines, through whispers wrapped in gold. There are no ladders in Enoch's vision, no stairways with marble steps or angelic choirs singing hymns of welcome. What he describes is something else entirely, a dimensional ascent not of body but of vibration. Taken by the holy ones, Enoch is brought into the heavens not through death but through alignment. His eyes are opened, not symbolically, literally. His awareness is expanded until the veil between realms thins and what was invisible becomes structure. The Book of Enoch speaks of 7 heavens, each layered above the next, vast and alive. Not metaphor, not poetry. Spheres of reality with rules, with hierarchy, with resonance. In the first heaven, he sees the movement of celestial bodies, stars tethered to laws, not random but governed by beings of light. In the second, he hears the weeping of angels, watchers who betrayed their station and now dwell in suspended sentence, bound in darkness. The higher he ascends, the more incomprehensible the visions become. In the fourth, he sees the pattern of seasons, the keepers of time. In the fifth, angelic hosts, infinite and ordered. In the sixth, the watchers of chaos and the punishers of stars out of alignment. And in the seventh, beyond form, beyond reason, the throne. A place of light so total it devours form. A place from which judgment flows not as punishment but as vibration. There, the Ancient of Days sits surrounded by wheels of fire, thousands upon thousands of radiant beings, their faces unreadable, their frequency unbearable. Enoch does not flinch. He observes. He records. He is not destroyed, he is initiated. This is the knowledge of the heavens. Not fact, but structure. Not commandments, but configurations. The heavens are not just places up there, they are invisible layers of energy and order. Enoch saw how the universe is built like a sacred system. Enoch is shown the order behind creation, the balance that binds stars to cycles, souls to form, and judgment to energy. In these realms, cause and consequence are one. To think is to create. To align is to ascend. Sin, as Enoch understands it now, is not moral error, but distortion. A break in the harmonics of being. The Watchers broke that harmony. Not with hatred. With urgency. They bypassed the divine architecture. They gave humans tools before teaching them tuning. And the result was collapse. But not all collapses are ends. Some are thresholds. Enoch is told to write what he sees. Not just for his generation, but for those far in the future. He is shown the book of the courses of the heavenly luminaries, a star map that outlines solar and lunar mechanics, equinoxes, seasons, and eclipses with precision far beyond his era. This portion of the book, the astronomical book, outlines a solar calendar of 364 days. A calendar later adopted by the Essenes at Qumran and still used in Ethiopian liturgy. Why does this matter? Because Enoch's vision is not dreamlike. It is technical. Cosmic order rendered in form. A sacred physics. The structure of the heavens not as allegory but as geometry. He is handed the blueprint not just of the stars but of spiritual law. Here, science and mysticism do not compete. They converge. And it is this knowledge, the way of the heavens, that becomes the true danger. Because if humanity remembers the structure, it no longer depends on intermediaries. No temples. No thrones. The divine becomes internal. The soul, a fragment of the pattern. Enoch returns, but not the same. In later mystical texts, most notably 3 Enoch, preserved in the Hekkelot literature, the transformation is complete. Enoch becomes Metatron. Not metaphor. Function. The celestial scribe. The lesser YHVH. The one who sits at the side of the throne, recording all that moves within the divine field. No longer man. Not fully angel. A fusion. The text speaks of his wings, 36 of them. Of his eyes, tens of thousands. Of his robe woven from glory. The seraphim fear him. Even the highest beings make way. Metatron is not worshipped. He is remembered. Because his path is not exceptional, it is instructive. He is what happens when the human aligns with the architecture. When the soul stops obeying the illusion of limitation and returns to resonance. This is the hidden message of Enoch. The heavens are not above. They are encoded, accessible, structured, and dangerous when approached without alignment. The Watchers breached it. Enoch mapped it. and the blueprint once buried has begun to rise again. When Enoch descended, the earth was no longer silent. The children of the Watchers, the Nephilim, had grown beyond what was bound by breath. Their forms were immense, yes, but it was their resonance that brought dread. They were incompatible with the frequency of creation. They fed not only on flesh, but on energy. Their presence frayed the fabric of the world. And so came the response. The flood was not a punishment. It was a reset, a rebalancing of the signal. The earth had become contaminated, not by evil in the moral sense, but by energetic dissonance. Humanity, hybridized and misaligned, could no longer hear the cosmic order. The flood silenced the distortion. But knowledge does not drown. Before the waters rose, Enoch passed the books. To Methuselah, to Lamech, and finally to Noah. Not only instructions for building the ark, but scrolls, writings of the Watchers, the heavens, the judgments, the stars. These scrolls, according to some traditions, were sealed and hidden. Others were preserved through memory, symbol, and seed. After the flood, fragments remained. And so began the second descent of knowledge, not from angels, but from men. A priesthood emerged. Not one, but many. Across Sumer, Egypt, the Indus, the Andes. Human beings who carried pieces of the code and built structures to preserve its pattern. In Mesopotamia, they were the Apkallu, 7 sages born before the flood, keepers of divine craft. Each represented a discipline: writing, healing, astronomy, law. Their stories mirror the Watchers. Their temples mirror Enoch's stars. In Egypt, Thoth emerged, scribe of the gods, keeper of the Me, divine principles, laws of form and transformation. He taught geometry, timekeeping, language. He held the Ankh, the key of life, and the Jed, the pillar of energy. The Book of Thoth, like Enoch's scrolls, was said to contain knowledge that could destroy the unworthy. In Persia, the Magi. In Tibet, the Tulkas. In Israel, the Zadokites. Each one building, naming, writing. Each one claiming authority. Some remembered. Others controlled. The knowledge brought by the Watchers had not vanished. It had mutated. It moved underground. It passed from temple to initiate, wrapped in ritual, encoded in stone, veiled in myth. The stars above became maps below, pyramids aligned to Sirius, ziggurats echoing the vault of heaven, dolmens tuned to solstice light. But not all who held the knowledge were pure. Azazel's impulse to give power without preparation lingered. The fusion of the sacred and the profane gave birth to institutions. The same hands that anointed kings also forged weapons. The same scrolls that spoke of balance were used to justify hierarchy. The divine blueprint was copied, not lived, and so secret orders rose. To preserve, to protect, and sometimes to pervert. The Gnostics would later say that the world was crafted by a demiurge, a being who had forgotten the original light. That what we call reality is a distortion, a dim echo of the first design. They, too, remembered Enoch. Not always by name, but by resonance. The Essenes at Qumran, who preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls, followed a solar calendar nearly identical to the one described in Enoch's astronomical book. They spoke of a war between the sons of light and sons of darkness. They named angels. They awaited a return. In the Book of Jubilees, another text from the Second Temple period, the story of the Watchers is retold with detail. Azazel is blamed directly for all corruption. He is bound in the desert, a motif later echoed in Yom Kippur's scapegoat ritual when a goat bearing the sins of the people is driven into the wilderness. Echoes upon echoes. Layers within layers. The Church, when it formed centuries later, would ban the Book of Enoch. Not with flame, but with omission. It was not quoted, not copied, not canonized. The Council of Laodicea in the 4th century listed only the 66 books now known as the Protestant Bible. Enoch was too direct, too cosmic, too incompatible with a system built on mediation. But it did not disappear. In Ethiopia, it was preserved not as apocrypha but as scripture. The Guizi manuscript known as 1 Enoch survived, hand-copied for generations. When James Bruce brought it to Europe in the 18th century, scholars were stunned. Here was a book older than much of the Torah quoted in the New Testament, especially in the Book of Jude, and yet completely excluded from modern theology. It was not forgotten. It was hidden. And as humanity entered its mechanical age, its age of steel and steam, circuits and silicon, the symbols of the Watchers returned. Not in the sky, but in the wire, the signal, the data. Today, we map stars with satellites, modify genes with code, simulate consciousness in machines. We teach children to command computers before they can read ancient texts. The same pattern emerges: acceleration without grounding. The Watchers fell for knowledge. We now fall for novelty. And still, the book waits. There is a moment, unspoken in most scripture, when the witness becomes the word. Not a metaphor. A frequency shift. A crossing of threshold that leaves behind identity, time, and history, not as rejection, but as transcendence. Enoch, seventh from Adam, becomes something else. Metatron. The tradition is not silent on this. It is suppressed. In the Hekkelot literature, mystical Jewish texts of the early centuries, c. 3 Enoch describes it plainly. Enoch is taken alive into the highest heaven. He is transformed by the hand of God. His flesh becomes flame. His bones fire. His eyes, lightning. His voice, thunder. He is not killed. He is rewritten. The scribe of heaven. The voice before the throne. The lesser YHVH. This is not angelic apotheosis for the sake of drama. It is instruction by example. A human consciousness refined through obedience not to religion but to cosmic law becomes a function of divine architecture. A consciousness aligned so perfectly with the heavenly pattern that it no longer returns to dust but to purpose. The Kabbalists understood this. In the Tree of Life, Metatron occupies the space of Keter, the crown, the closest point between creation and the ineffable source. In some systems, he is the conduit through which divine will enters manifestation. The gatekeeper of form. The angel who writes the Book of Life. He is not a being of hierarchy. He is a bridge. And bridges are not worshipped. They are crossed. Enoch's transformation is encoded in symbol. The number 365, the years he lived, corresponds not only to the solar year, but to wholeness. He is not taken too soon. He is taken at fullness. At the precise resonance. The ancient world encoded these correspondences in myth, in number, in name. Metatron is sometimes called the king of angels. But in the deepest current he is not king. He is cipher. A living code of divine human synthesis. In mystical texts he is described as wearing 70 names, as having 72 wings, as shining with the light of 365,000 suns. These are not literal descriptions, they use numbers and light to describe magnitude of energy, not physical appearance. These are not exaggerations. They are the language of magnitude. They tell the initiated, this is not a man elevated. This is the frequency of man aligned with the pattern behind all matter. An energy form aware of itself across dimensions. Why is this dangerous? Because it means the veil is thin. Because it means divinity is not confined to a throne. It can emerge from flesh. And this is where the story turns. Metatron is not a break from Enoch's humanity. He is its completion. The role of the scribe, which Enoch held on earth, is perfected in the heavens. In life, he wrote the deeds of the Watchers. In ascension, he writes the deeds of worlds. The Book of Enoch is clear, all that occurs is recorded. Not in ink. In resonance. This is where Enoch's transformation converges with the Akashic current, that vibrational field described by mystics across cultures. The idea that every action, thought, and intention is written into the fabric of the cosmos. Not as judgment. As memory. Enoch, now Metatron, is that memory. Made aware. Made articulate. He is not God. He is the record of God's unfolding. Metatron is not a god to be worshipped. He represents what a human can become when fully aligned with divine structure. And this is the secret the institutions could not afford to preserve, that a human could pass the veil not through bloodline, ritual, or priesthood, but through alignment. That initiation does not begin in the temple. It begins in choice, in integrity, in the refusal to forget. The earliest Christian mystics knew this. Origen referenced Enoch's vision of the heavens. Tertullian called the Book of Enoch scripture. But later councils silenced these voices. They needed saints, not initiates. They needed obedience, not transformation. And so Enoch was removed from text, from liturgy, from memory. But the imprint remained. In the Hermetic Asclepius we find the echo, "Man is a marvel, O Asclepius." For he enters into the nature of the gods as though he himself were a god. He is familiar with the race of demons and he knows that he has come from the same origin. This is the same current, the same thread. Because when one remembers that the structure of heaven is not above but within, hierarchy dissolves. And hierarchy, once dissolved, cannot control. That is the true danger of Metatron. Not that he is powerful, but that he began as one of us. The Book of Enoch is not a book about angels. It is a book about possibility. And the heavens, with all their order, their watchers, their courts, their fire, are not distant realms. They are structures mirrored in the soul. The watchers fell because they offered power without pattern. Enoch rose because he surrendered to the pattern without seeking power. That distinction is the axis on which this entire mystery turns. The book was buried. Not lost, not burned, buried. Folded into time like a seed, placed beneath layers of orthodoxy, empire, and myth. It survived not by chance, but by rhythm. Some knowledge is too precise to be forgotten. It waits. It chooses its return. When the Book of Enoch re-emerged, first in Ethiopia's ancient churches, then in the desert caves of Qumran, then into the hands of scholars who could barely believe what they held, it did not simply restore a missing chapter. It shifted the timeline. It revealed that what we call sacred history is incomplete by design. And it asked a question few are prepared to hear. What happens when humanity remembers the heavens? Not as metaphor, not as afterlife, but as structure, as blueprint. The watchers were punished for giving this knowledge without wisdom. But the knowledge itself was never evil. It was divine, sacred science, the mechanics of reality, geometry that builds stars, language that births worlds, names that carry function. Frequency is law. What the book reveals quietly, insistently, is that this knowledge has always been accessible. But it requires alignment. The heavens are not reached by ascent of body. They are entered by calibration of being. Enoch did not physically climb to the heavens. Instead, he entered through inner alignment, like tuning to the right frequency. He resonated. This is the crux. The heavens are not places. They are states. Each sphere Enoch passed through was not distance, but refinement. Density fell away. Form dissolved. What remained was presence. Awareness. The ability to witness without distortion. And this is why his return matters now. Because the age of noise is reaching its peak. The signal, the true signal, is buried under simulation. Humanity stands again on the brink of knowledge without preparation. Artificial intelligence mimics intuition. Genetic editing simulates creation. Virtual immersion replaces vision. The temptation of the watchers is back, dressed in circuitry, code, and speed. But Enoch's book was not meant to prevent the fall. It was meant to inform the choice. It does not cry apocalypse. It sings architecture. It shows how the heavens function, how justice is encoded, how stars move in patterns that mirror ethics, how time itself is not linear but layered. The astronomical book describes not only solar years but portals, gates through which light enters reality. These are not poetic inventions. They match observations from civilizations that built calendars aligned with Sirius, Orion, and the Pleiades long before telescopes. The message is constant. Heaven was never far. It was hidden in plain sight. And that is the danger and power of remembrance. To recall the heavens is to remember one's place in the system. Not as servant, not as ruler, as participant. Enoch is not an exception. He is a map. His transformation is not myth. It is mechanism. But remembrance requires risk. Because to live with awareness of heaven is to live with responsibility. The watchers offered knowledge without maturity. That path ends in flood. But Enoch walked with wisdom. And that path, the path of integration, leads to fire. Not fire of destruction. Fire of refinement. This is the final gift of the book. Not prophecy. Pattern. Not punishment. Process. The book ends not with fear, but with restoration. The elect rise. The earth is renewed. Justice is not imposed, it emerges from realignment. This is the key. What was broken must be retuned. What was hidden must be remembered. And what was Enoch can be again. Not in form, in function. Because the heavens still speak. And the book was never just written. It was planted. The story of Enoch isn't just ancient myth, it's a reminder that we all carry a spark of divine structure. And when we live in alignment, with truth, with integrity, with clarity, we activate the same current that lifted Enoch beyond the veil. If this opens something in you, even if it was just a quiet stirring, then the resonance is already working. This is only the beginning. Subscribe for more explorations into the hidden architecture behind myth, memory, and spirit. Each chapter we unlock brings us closer to what was buried, not to be forgotten, but to be remembered by those ready to remember. And if something here moved you, share a thought below. Not for algorithms. For the others who were listening. The Watchers were not the end of the story. They were the threshold.